the start line Curtis White here from you.
Is razendsnel in dat trappen.
And ready to go here in Brazener, and we are underway. Van der Poel alongside Curtis White, Tonart right alongside him, and it's the American that gets a whole shot.
Dat was ronde 1 en op de laatste.
The coffee tasted good this morning. He's got a new podcast, In the Red. To see him with such a great start today, I know a lot of American fans are going to be really pumped by this.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of In the Red with Curtis White. Man, we are coming off a blistering week. A lot of racing, a lot of traveling. We took last week off from recording with this podcast because there's too much racing. Tony.
Too much? I don't know about too much. I mean, I felt like it was a very solid week. I was very entertained. I feel refreshed and well rested, so I'm not sure what your hang up is here. But I really like the American Crossmas period or whatever we're labeling it here. But I thought it was pretty awesome. I'm hoping you're going to do it again for me next week.
Yeah, Tony, I'm really happy that you feel very refreshed and rejuvenated and springy and just, all the good sensations right now. I'm really happy that you got your weeks full of racing there.
Good. I'm glad. There was a moment though in Fayetteville. It was pretty rainy and cold. I don't know if it was cold. It was rainy. I'm sure it probably wasn't too cold for you. It looked pretty tough. And I just wanted you to know that in that moment I was suffering a little bit too, because I kept getting nice cold New York Curtis's from the fridge, and my hand was getting a little cold. Like, I think we need like a koozie or something to cover that up. So while you were suffering, I was suffering too. So I hope that makes you feel better.
We all have our cross to bear. But yeah, that was, and I'm complaining about the heavy racing schedule. I was only focused on the World Cups this week. We had 6 big races. We'll go over all the racing, but a lot of things, and the travel was a big thing that we had to deal with. It was almost 20 hours in the car traveling between Madison, Wisconsin. We had 2 races up there at the Truck Factory in Waterloo. Awesome race, awesome production those folks do up there. Drove down to Fayetteville. We got to look at the preview of the World Championships course we're going to see at the end of this January. And 9 hours in the car all the way up back to Iowa City for the Jingle Cross course. They had 3 days of racing. Let's dive in. How did all the racing look from your end, Tony?
Said it was great. It was a lot of fun to be able to watch it all. And there was really good coverage across GCN and Flow between the two of them. We were able to get a lot of the racing, and I thought it was fantastic. We got to see, I like seeing the C2s and the C1s that didn't always have all of the biggest names in there, but then you get to see some new riders. So that was a cool experience. And then the World Cups were phenomenal. So I'm excited to hear your perspective on it and kind of get some of the stuff we didn't see from the feeds.
So I think the only race of the last week and a half that wasn't televised was the C2 day in Trek. So we had, of the 6 races, 5 races were televised. We had the Friday, Saturday races at Jingle Cross that were part of the USCX series, and then the 3 World Cups, which you could find on Flow Bikes here in the US. It was really great racing. And I decided to focus only on the World Cups because my goal was to achieve a top 10 result this week. I felt like I was bringing my best. I was really eyeing those races. I didn't want to get distracted with the effort of the Friday C2 and Trek or the other races. I wanted to really nail those races at the World Cups. Some success, some good takeaways, and a couple disappointments. I think the first World Cup at Trek, that we have a lot to dive into there, because in the women's race, we saw that it was like a F1 racing track. It was so fast. There were these really tight turns. It flowed really well. The course was tacky. And then I remember an hour before the start on Sunday in Waterloo, looking at the weather radar, and it was a 10% chance of rain, or it was just not even a storm cell. It was just barely a blip. Didn't think anything was going to change. I came into the day with Grifo tires, 25 psi, and 5 minutes before the start, the skies opened up and just turned the track to what felt like an ice rink. It was so slippery out there.
Yeah, it seemed to show for a lot of riders. It seemed like a lot of people were in that same boat. They all chosen similar tire choice, and we saw a lot of crashing really early. We couldn't see, or I didn't catch where you were in some of that carnage. Did you go down? What did that look like for you when that hit?
Yeah, well, I think it was a situation where I think a lot of riders went down because it was just, you're on these tires that are meant for a very fast flowing course, and then the track turns to an ice rink. So it was 3 or 4 laps of just absolute chaos. You're coming into the pits, you want a different tire, you're lowering the pressure again, and the course is just constantly changing. So you have these burned in lines where that's the slickest part of the course. So you need to be looking for alternative lines, cutting the apex a bit differently, looking for green traction on the outside of these corners, or cutting turns a bit differently. And you're constantly experimenting with new things. So you need to have the confidence to trust whatever decision you're making in that moment and move on. If you make a mistake, move on. I heard a couple of riders say, well, yeah, that was a chaotic first 2 laps, wasn't it? And I was like, man, I felt like I didn't have my stuff together for 3 or 4 laps. You know, it was just, for me, I felt like there was a loss of focus, and I was getting a little frustrated with not hooking up with the tires, or I wasn't making good decisions with my lines. And, there were some loss of places there. But halfway through the race, I was able to find equipment that I was confident with and start riding a much cleaner race, make up a few spots. But 23rd at the World Cup in Trek in Waterloo, that was, that stung a little bit because I felt really good. The form was there. It was just the technique wasn't quite where I wanted it.
There's got to be a lot of communication between you and your pit crew in those situations. Do they come to the pit? They're in the pit with tire choices and things like that, and you're able to tell them as you're going by, I need this, I need that. What does that look like for you?
Yeah, so in a cyclocross race, we're always trying to communicate with our pit crews, even if we're not pitting often. They're always yelling out time gaps or positions or any little tidbits that I can use. We don't race with radios, but when we do pit change, something that I've always been an advocate of is no matter what or whatever the reason is you're pitting, always communicate why with your pit crew, because there are surprisingly a lot of athletes that come in, and even if they just need a clean bike, just drop their bike off, or they hand it off to the mechanic and take the next one, and it's this guessing game with the mechanics. Okay, what's wrong? Do we just have to clean it? Is there a flat tires or something wrong with the derailleur? Did they crash? And they have to go through the bike in a very frantic manner, and you're coming by the next pit in 3 to 4 or 5 minutes, if it's a slower lap. So sometimes it's quicker than that. So they have a very short window of time to identify what the issue is. So I didn't have any mechanical issues. So anytime I came in, I was either saying down 1 PSI, down half a PSI, or clean the bike. All these things. If there's no issues, the equipment is good, you don't need to touch the tire pressure. All I was saying is clean, because I'm coming in so fast, out quickly. That's all the time I have. So just say clean, that one word, the mechanics know what to do. Some races you're communicating a lot more with your mechanics than others. The race in Waterloo, there was a lot of communication. I probably pitted 4, maybe 5 times, and it was all to change the equipment. So started on the Grifos, brought the tire pressure down, thinking that maybe the rain would subside, and then the rain got heavier. So I went to a Baby Limas tire. Then I lowered the pressure again, then lowered it again. And in the final 4 laps, I felt much more confident in the lines I was choosing and my equipment and being able to take advantage of that. But even then, you were on lap 5, if you were able to ride a line cleanly. On lap 7, it deteriorated and you need to look for another one. So it was just, there's this creative part of cyclocross where you're always looking for something new to try, and not to be afraid of failure. So, and that was the one thing I needed to get out of my way for the first half of the race was, don't be afraid to fail or to fall. Just keep trying new things and being creative. Look for that outside line and be observant of who's around you and what are other athletes doing. When are they pitting? can you overhear what they're saying to their mechanics, or what lines are they taking? That was something I got a little bit frustrated with. And that's, I mean, all athletes go through that, these times of frustration, or you're more focused on yourself, except, you know, and not what's going on around you.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I think that's something that watching at home, you just don't understand. I mean, you don't realize the level that you're thinking while you're at your limits and trying to keep a clear head with all of the factors that you're working through. So that's really cool to hear about. So when you get done with Waterloo, you got a pretty big travel in a couple short days. We were going to try to record last week, and you and I were texting back and forth and just kind of said, we need to just let you focus on the racing and take the week off. And, you know, you got with that mid-season or midweek race rather. So what do you do to recover with just a couple days apart and all the travel? Like, how does that work for you?
So the schedule was, we came in to Waterloo the Thursday or Friday before the racing. I decided not to race the C2, focus only on the World Cup. We raced the World Cup on Sunday. We started the drive down to Fayetteville, Arkansas Sunday night. We made it to Des Moines, stayed in a hotel there, then finished the drive Monday. We got in Monday afternoon. Monday's a full recovery day. We're focusing on nutrition is a big thing, especially when you're traveling. And for this week and a half period, I was in 5 different beds. So there's a lot of disruption to your sleeping routines. You need to make sure you're on top of the nutrition, the diet, and you're trying to control all these factors in this really hectic period. So we got down on Monday, full recovery day, went for an easy spin. Tuesday was still early in the block. I only had 1 race in me, so I was able to do openers, a couple of hot laps on the course. And before the World Cup on Wednesday in Fayetteville, everyone was looking at the weather. We saw a couple storms had like a 60% chance, 50% chance of coming in to Fayetteville, and there was a lot of uncertainty with the weather. So when we were pre-riding the World Cup course, we just kept thinking, this is so fast. The course was wide open. In the first 2 minutes of the lap, there was a lot of loss of elevation, which made positioning really important. You're immediately thinking, I need a good start. There's a lot of descending, sweeping turns and no pedaling on a potentially very fast course. If you're too far back, there's the potential to get caught up in crashes. You really had to, you had to fight with all you had to maintain a really good position to stay ahead of the chaos. And if this was a bone dry course, we could have been looking at a really, really high speed race. A track that comes to mind that's really fast is the Zolder World Cup. It's always Boxing Day in Belgium, the day after Christmas, and it's on an F1 speedway. It has a 500-meter straightaway after the start. It's wide open. It's blistering fast. And this track kind of reminded me of that, but there were some really interesting humps. It was kind of flowy. There was a mountain bike race there earlier this year, so you could kind of see parts of that they used in the mountain bike race. It reminded me of like a motocross race, or, you know, mixed with you're playing Mario Kart video games. Like, it was just, it was such a unique course that was flowing, and it had whoops, and it was just fast.
It looked impressive on TV. It definitely looks like a place I would love to go, and wanted to, you know, was thinking about how cool it would be to see the World Championships there this year. We talk a lot about how the way US courses don't really match up to European courses and all the factors that come into play. You know, they're putting them together the day before in some park, and, you know, you got to cater to the amateurs and all of those kind of things. But Fayetteville is pretty unique in the sense that it's a permanent course. It's designed specifically for World Championship racing. So is it designed more like a European course, or does it still have kind of an American flair? Like, how do they match up?
It's a little bit of both, but also when you're catering, if you're not catering, but when you're producing an event that's at a World Championship caliber or World Cup caliber, it's not, do we need to create a course that's suitable for the professional athletes? Because courses vary all the time. You need to have an infrastructure for a large amount of people to view this race effectively, for it to be good for TV, Where are you going to put the beer tents? How are the fans going to get around? Where's all the parking going to be? Where are all the teams going to be positioned before the race? All of these things come into effect. It's not like an amateur C2 or an amateur race or a C2 where it's in a park and you can kind of figure this stuff out on the fly, or all the stakes are kind of loose. It's a very high production event. So we didn't have a lot of spectators on at the Wednesday race in Fayetteville because it's in the middle of a work week. And there's no amateur racing. So you had mostly the professionals there. We did have we did have some spectators there that made the trip down to cheer on, and it was awesome to have that, but nowhere near what we're going to see for the World Championships in Fayetteville. So I'm excited to see what this venue is going to look like when it has several thousand people roaming around or in the beer tents. What's that going to sound like? How are people going to move around? What's the experience going to be like? That's what I'm looking forward to the most.
Did you get any feel from the European riders about what they thought about that course?
I think it raced much. I think everyone enjoyed racing it when it was muddy. I think I'll say that, because if the course was going to be so fast, it wouldn't have been very selective, and it was just going to be group racing. You're going to have this big washing machine effect. You're going to have people who are just hanging on to this group that want to maintain just the wheel in front of them. But I think that the conditions, the mud, the rain, it makes it an honest course. So we had these long straights of a very tricky descent that was very slippery with the rain, and then a long diesel tractor pull climb that we had to get back up. And it was just, if it was dry, you carried your momentum up, no problem. With the amount of rain that we got, it was so heavy and thick. So it was cool to see what the course was going to be like. Bone dry and then really heavy mud. So somewhere in the middle, that could be the condition for January. But I think I think a lot of people enjoyed it being muddy.
So we're hoping for mud. I'm hoping for mud. It was fun to watch you race in the mud. I watched, I think it's Geaton, maybe since the last time we recorded. Geaton.
Keaton.
There you go. Which is a nice muddy race. And I hadn't watched one in a while, I guess. And I just went, man, it kind of reminded me like how much I like watching it when it's like that. And it was nice to see some similar conditions in Fayetteville and really see a muddy cross.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Well, technically, so Keaton is there's a lot of sand there. So if you looked at all the tires that the riders were using, a lot of Grifo tires or Dugas Typhoons out there. So you see it's a really heavy, muddy track, but yet they're running a lower profile tire because they're racing a lot on sand, or the mud has a sandy consistency. So there's you wanted a faster rolling tire to kind of float over the sand. Not exactly what you wanted in Fayetteville. I was running a Baby Limas tire with somewhere in the ballpark of 17, 18 PSI. Because the course was so manicured there wasn't a lot of potentially harmful obstacles to get a flat tire on, or there weren't a lot of rocks and roots there. There was a lot of this rolled out turf on the course that I think a lot of people were curious how it would react to that amount of rain and people riding over it. So you're constantly looking for traction. There was a hard underlayer there, so you wanted a bit of a faster rolling tire. It wasn't like the tires are just really digging down looking for traction anywhere. A Limas is more of like a tractor tire, but I wanted a little bit faster profile, like a Baby Limas. That was kind of what I thought was the perfect tire for that day.
So how'd you feel about the race as a whole? You move up a little bit from Waterloo. You're in 18th there, so a little progress. Do you feel good about that effort? Do you feel like there's things you would change?
I felt better, but there's always things you can improve or change. It took the first couple laps are a little frustrating because when we were pre-riding the course, between pre-riding the course and racing, the course did deteriorate enough to where that was just it was you weren't going out blind, but you didn't know exactly how the course was how it deteriorated through the women's race, which it did quite a bit. So I went out with, and I think a lot of people did this, with the tire pressure that they were pre-riding. And actually I went down from my pressure that I pre-rode in, but it's still, I needed a couple more PSI to get a little bit more traction. So it took me about a lap and a half to get the tire pressure that I wanted and needed. And I, again, went down in pressure later in the race because the course continued to deteriorate. So I think I started off at 22 PSI because that descent is so fast. So I had a decent start, but I wasn't quite hooking up well with the traction, lost some placings, got the equipment dialed in. But there was a group fighting for the top 10 that it seemed like 10, 15 seconds in front of me for 3 or 4 laps. And I was just like, I want to get to that group because when you're in a group like that, there's more surging and recovery, surge and recover, surge and recover. There's that accordion effect to it. And the riders in the front of that are able to ride a bit more efficiently, but it groups up in these longer straightaways. If you're chasing, you have a bit more of a consistent diesel effort and you're not surging as much and you have less recovery time. So I felt like I had this more longer drawn out effort to get up to this group and they were able to find more recovery time. So when it came time to really punch the ticket and the group exploded, you had the front group or the front riders in that group that were able to really accelerate. They were able to conserve their energy. I continue to have this diesel pace, pick up a couple of riders that were in that group. But I think that you know, the rider that had a really good ride there, Gage Hecht, he I believe finished 8th. That's an awesome ride for a World Cup. I think that was a result that I wanted. It was a result that I felt like I was capable of, but you know, he was able to really take advantage of that group. He was in that group. He had a really good start. He was in the group and was able to surge and recover. And then also use other riders to study from. What are some of the riders in that top 10 group? What are the lines they're taking? He was able to build confidence and following those wheels. And it paid off at the end. So that's something that I was, man, I really wanted to be up there, but, you know, I was, you know, a little melancholy, but, you know, on to the next one. It was just another one of those things you learn in sport.
Is it motivating, frustrating when you see that, when you see a rider who you compete with and has that result and you feel like, you know, you have the potential to be there as well? Is that something that drives you to keep going? Is it something that's discouraging? How do you process that after the fact?
No, it's definitely not discouraging. Gage is a rider that I respect, and he's someone that I try to learn from. You know, if we're competitors, I'm constantly trying to analyze what he's doing well and try to understand his weaknesses and, you know, trying to get a leg up constantly. But, you know, the difference between he and I physiologically is not that much. So I don't think that he was a superhuman for a day. I think he competed up to his potential. That was a really solid result, and he was competing to his potential. Positioning wise, I wasn't in as good of a position as he was to take advantage of that group. So it was more of a reflection of the things that I didn't do on that day. So it's motivating for me to see a rider that I see as an equal or very close to riding to that level, because I feel like I can be there.
Gives you confidence that you know you belong there. You can be there too.
Yeah, I just need to do it now.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely. And good for him. Congratulations to him. He rode well. It's great to see, you know, and especially in an international event like that, to see the stars and stripes up there and competitive. And we want to see that as American fans for sure. Even if I'm biased and I want to see you up there ahead of him, but you know,
yeah,
and it's see the Americans do well.
On the men's side, we haven't had. It's been a while since we've had a top 10 ride in the World Cup.
Yeah,
at that
impressive
level, you know, and the list isn't that long, and you know, that's always something that I wanted to be that guy to kind of get that result. But it's, you know, I feel like that's coming for me. It's you know, I'll get there and just have faith in my ability. But and then on the women's side too, we had Clara Honsinger, who had an amazing ride, getting 3rd. I love seeing the video blowing by Mariana Voss on the last half lap. It was just like, it's like a hot knife through butter.
Oh yeah. Yeah. That's gotta be a career moment, man. I mean, that's amazing. I think that race really solidifies 2 things for me from a spectator perspective. Is one, I want to see the women race for an hour. I don't understand why they don't. if the racing is better for 50 minutes, then the men should race for 50 minutes. If it's better for an hour, then they both should race for an hour. I don't understand why this is a debate. And I would have liked to see another lap out of that and see what Clara does with another lap, and Mariana Vos for that matter. Maybe you can't hold her off for another lap. Like, she's a pretty talented rider, right? But maybe she catches Betsema too. So I would have loved to see another lap out of that. I'd also like to see as the production value increases. And I was really impressed with Flo. I thought they did a very nice job. I thought that Tim Johnson in the commentary was really good. I enjoyed all of their coverage quite a bit. That makes a great case for some more split screen type coverage, because we didn't get to see Clara move up through the group. And that was an exciting part of the race. So I'm hoping as they get more cameras and they polish it, that they're able to show us that part of the race as well. I still want to see the front of the race, but I would have loved to see her climb through that group a little bit more that we didn't get to catch. But what a performance. Congratulations to her.
Absolutely. And to your point, the beautiful thing about cyclocross is that there's many races within the race. And sometimes the most exciting races, just outside of the view of the camera. And that's what people love about the sport. And it's this honest battle and fight for every single position. You don't often see in a road race, people race for the win and that's it. And if you roll in 10th or 15th or 20th, it's, they roll in, or it's something that they don't care about. But in a cyclocross race, it's honest. It's like, you have people fighting for every single position. So that's the unique part about the sport, is that, it's honest. I think it's good for the soul. It keeps people true to themselves, and you're fighting for every single inch.
Yeah, definitely. It's one of the best parts about the sport. And I just hope as we grow, they get to showcase more of that. And we see just the lead rider, the lead couple of riders, and we want to see those other battles because they matter. And sometimes they matter for the podium and not just 10th place or whatever. So it's good stuff.
Absolutely. On to Iowa.
On to Iowa.
All right.
So
9 hours in the car later.
9 hours, another big travel. Gets you, you moved up in the finish spot again. So up to that 16th place. So progress all the way through each World Cup, you got better. You chose again not to race Friday or Saturday and just focus on Sunday. You feel good about that decision still? You wouldn't change that?
Yeah, looking back now, I felt like that's what I had to do. I was originally planning on competing in the C1, the Friday night C1. I've done the Friday night race before. I think it's an awesome atmosphere. The top of Mount Crumpet, it's this really cool party scene that just everyone's up there and it's dark. You had the floodlights kind of lighting up the course, and it's a unique atmosphere. It takes a little while to calm down and fall asleep after the race, but it's just fun. And I did plan on doing that race, and especially with those first 2 days being part of the new USCX series, I wanted to really to be at the front of those races to compete. And I knew there was going to be some more European representation in those races. I believe Friday night we saw not only Vincent Bostens, but Thijs Aerts, the brother of Toon Aerts, and Anton Fernandez, I believe, Paulo Sausen Bingle rider. But I was talking earlier about, with so much travel and all these logistics and things happening, you really do need to control a lot of different pieces of your environment. You're in several different hotel beds. Your diet needs to be good. Like you have all these things that you need to control. And traveling up, it's just my stomach wasn't feeling very good. So I knew I needed to get that piece of the puzzle back in check before I was 100%. So I decided not to race Friday night, focus on controlling my environment, getting back to where I need to be. And ultimately for this week, the World Cups were my top goal. And I did what I had to get back and bring my best to Sunday. So unfortunately missing out on the Friday night and Saturday races, but in hindsight, that was the correct move for me. Because it's still, we have racing left. We have the last round of the USCX next weekend in Cincinnati. We have a C1, C2 weekend. Unfortunately, I'm out of the contention for the win in the standings now. It seems like Kerry has it. but it's an awesome opportunity for some high level racing next weekend and for it to be televised again. But I was just focused on bringing my best to the World Cup.
Definitely. Yeah. I enjoyed Friday. I enjoyed Saturday as well. I liked watching Kerry and Niels. We've had them both on the pod before, and they had a great battle on Saturday night. That was really, really fun to watch. And I was impressed with Kerry. He had a great weekend to do all three of those. That's got to be a pretty physically daunting effort, but definitely some good racing those 2 days.
Yeah. He made a post. So he not only did all three that weekend, but he did all 6 races of this week and a half, the 2 races in Waterloo, Fayetteville, and then the 3 in Iowa. And I mean, that's a huge demand on your body with the travel and maintaining good nutrition and the sleep and all the recovery, like all these things like that. That was impressive to see. I'm curious to how he thinks that those efforts affected him on the Sunday race in the World Cup, because he still had a solid race.
Yeah, he held his own.
I know
Yeah.
Friday he wasn't quite as, he wasn't the normal Kerry. I saw that. And I think a lot of people noticed this. I think he was 10th in the C1. But a rider that I saw that had a really good ride was Eric Bruner. He seems to be coming on to very good form right now. He unfortunately had a mechanical in the C1. You had 3 Belgians up in the front fighting it out. The coverage was cool to see the dynamic and the battle of the Friday night race. Vincent Boston's wins again in the US. It seemed like he needed a bit more luck Friday night than he did the previous nights, but or the previous races. But it was fun to see that. I wish I was there. I definitely had FOMO on the Friday night race because that was just such a cool atmosphere, and it looked like a race that I would have really enjoyed it. It was very fast. But yeah. And then I think also Kerry, he said something to the effect of he must have done 50 passes up Mount Crumpet between those 3 races. He posted here 52 race pace efforts up Mount Crumpet.
Oh, yeah, that's impressive.
Yeah.
It's a long weekend. Well done, Kerry.
Well done. That was a good week, but I'm curious to see how that affects him going forward, because it's a massive demand on the body. How that'll affect him for next weekend in Cincinnati. Hopefully he recovers well and we're able to have another really good battle. But those are big efforts, and I knew that they would add up. So I'm curious to see how that plays out in the long run.
Yeah, the cool thing about those Friday, Saturday races too is we do get to see different riders than in the World Cup, when some of the top guys and women sit out those C1s and 2s, and you see a mix of different riders coming to the front and more riders get some camera time that wouldn't. You really saw that on Saturday with a big difference between some of the more amateur riders that were in that C2. But it was also pretty impressive to see the difference between riders like Kerry and Niels, who are, top in the world, and some younger riders who are chasing that, who get a great opportunity to race against guys of that caliber and get to be on TV in a way that they wouldn't necessarily if everybody jumped into that field. So I thought that was a really cool aspect of the amount of television coverage that we got out of this stint.
Absolutely. Yeah. So World Cup, Iowa, that was, of all the editions I've done of the Jingle Cross course, I think this is about the fastest I've ever done this course.
Yeah.
And you had such high level guys there that really pushed a really fast pace, and it was blistering. The start was chaotic, as it always is, because it has that S turn just after the finish line banner. It's only about 100 meters into right after the start. So I think I was right behind Lars van der Haar and Eli Iserbyt. Eli, I think, popped out of his pedal, and it kind of held me up for a brief second. So not the best start, but I was able to move up well enough after that. If you go back and see the footage, you'll see that there's a lot of traffic up Mount Crumpet because it was so fast that the lead riders could ride it well. But if you're outside the top 10, you're because there's so much traffic, you're going to have to get off and run, and you're already losing time because you're on your feet. And it's a little bit more of, an effort to get that wheel back. and then you're just frantic because you're in traffic and you want to move up and you want it like every single inch matters. So you're not getting anyone any space. But I was able to get up into a good group, ride within that group well. I was within the top 15, and I was with 4 laps to go. I overextended a bit. I saw Kevin Kuhn was bridging up to the group in front that had Vincent Bastons in it, and they were around 11th or 12th. That was the group that was knocking on the top 10 door. And I
know. We're seeing the ticker come through at that point. I think at one point it listed you as in 14th. Obviously, we don't get to see where you are physically, but you had you at 14th at one point, and you were getting close to that gap or to that group. And I was like, man, can you get in that group? Can you get in that group? How close were you?
I think I was the closest, or the highest I was up was 13th. And I put in a good dig with 4 to go. I thought the accordion was going to snap in the group behind. So if I have no problem bringing a rider or two with me to work with, because I knew that it was so fast and the straightaway at the start finish was long enough, and you needed another rider to kind of ping pong off of a little bit here. But the group stayed together, and very quickly that I paid dearly for that effort. I was able to make up some time, and I had a really good surge to get up there, but the tricky part about the Iowa course with it being so fast is it's almost harder with it being that fast. You're able to ride all these features, but with it being a very muddy race, yeah, it's taxing on the body, or there's more running, it's more of a diesel power effort, but you're more consistent because everyone has this consistent diesel effort. And you can't surge it so much. So when it's so fast, you're riding up Mount Crumpet, you're able to ride just about every feature, and you could really lay down a blistering lap time, but you can go over the red very quickly when it's that fast. It's a little bit more difficult to go into the red when it's more of a heavier track or when it's more diesel. So I went into the red, the bad in the red, not the good in the red here. We like to work with puns, but I paid very dearly for that effort. So I think there was one lap I went from that 13th to 21st over one pass of Mount Crumpet, like that. And it was everything I had to hold the wheel in front of me. I gutted myself just to stay within the group. So I knew if I could stay attached to that group, I could still be in the battle for a top 15. I just needed time to recover. So 3 to go. 2 to go. I was on the back of that group, really trying to recover every single chance that I could. And then in the final lap and a half, that was my opportunity to move up. I think Marcel Meissen was able to get off the front of that group, and I believe he finished in that 13th or 14th range. And I was able to make my way up to the front of that group almost. Gage Heck finished 15th. I was 16th in the end. I was happy with the ride. 16th in a World Cup is respectable still. But it's still, I was hungry for that top 10, and I felt like I got a little over ambitious too early. What would have happened if I saved that effort for the last lap, or if I understood just how the group was racing that course. So, definitely a learning experience. Looking back on the week, three very different World Cups. We really had 3 different courses for 3 different horses. It's like, a really slick and technical race in Waterloo, heavy diesel mud in Fayetteville, and then a bone dry, wicked fast race in Iowa. A lot of good. I mean, it's just that was fun. It was a fun week, but a lot of travel, a lot of attention to the minor details, and it's just, I definitely have been catching up on sleep since that week.
So do you think that this American curse period, or what Kerry was calling it, the cyclocross stage race of America, I don't know if we have a good name for it yet, but this really intense block of American racing, is this going to stay as part of the calendar in this fashion, or do you think it'll be revised? Is it something that can be sort of a staple of international cyclocross culture, where we have an October of crazy World Cups in a week, or what do you think should happen there?
I think that in the spirit of cyclocross, it was a really cool week. 6 races within a week and a half. It was a lot of opportunities for maybe some athletes to shine that aren't normally at the front. To get 3 World Cups on U.S. soil, that's something that we've been hyping up a lot, all through the preseason, through the spring and summer. This is something that, as fans of the sport, we love to see. From a logistical side of things, that was a really big ask for teams, for athletes. The logistics of it were just from leaving Waterloo to get to Fayetteville and to get to Iowa. That was 20 hours plus 20 plus hours in the car. So, within a week and a half, 5 different beds, 20 hours of driving, not including any of the driving to and from the course or any of the, then you have a lot of the international riders, the Belgians or the Dutch, anyone coming in from Europe that has to go back to Chicago, which is another handful of hours. So it's logistically, it's a very big ask. I think if the flow was Fayetteville, Iowa Trek, or ending with Fayetteville or one of those things, it's logistically that would be much easier on the team, because the staff that we have, it's seeing firsthand the work that they were putting in to make sure the equipment was dialed, but also just getting everything to the venue, selecting the parking space, setting up shop. If you come by the Cannondale compound at any race, you'll see we have a number of athletes that are there. We have our development team, and we have the pros, we have our mechanics, we need their workspace, we have several tents set up, we have our space, every rider has their cubby. You have it's all these little things to take into account just from the team perspective. Now, and it's always been unique to have these American World Cups because the European riders have to come over. And now that, for several years now, they're recognizing what we as Americans have to deal with every single year going to Europe. But when we go over, it's later in the year, it's during the holidays, and we stay for the World Championships. And we're in a foreign environment. It's not our community. We don't speak the language quite as well, and we're trying to operate at a high level still. So it's sometimes, when they're over in the US, they ask us for help. And sometimes when we're in Europe, we ask them for help. And it's, there's that, there's a bit more community building in that regard. So that's the really cool part of kind of that effort to globalize the sport, to get the World Cup, several World Cups here in the US, to draw the best riders to the US to compete. And it's a very uncomfortable environment for them. But I applaud their efforts as athletes and teams and their sponsors to get everyone over here to, also something that we can't really ignore is we're coming back, technically still within a pandemic. So to operate at a high level with those complications still, it's a big ask.
Yeah. And it was a great turnout. I know there was a lot of questions ahead of time of, are they going to show up? Are they not going to show up? And this sort of back and forth. But the fields were deep. Everybody showed up for the most part. And it was really awesome to see them come over and put in that effort and put on that showcase of racing. So hopefully they found value in it, and that they'll be willing to continue to go through those hurdles of travel, and both when they're here and to get here, so that they keep doing it, and the crowds grow and the coverage grows, so that we continue to get better racing in the States.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I know there's a little bit more, there's been a lot of talk in the press about the added complications of the European teams to come to the US. And some teams aren't able to fully support these blocks. And some of these athletes have to rely on their national federations. It's a really big effort. There were a couple articles out of Sporza this past, just after the World Cups, that came out that if you have Google Chrome or if you have Translate, I definitely encourage you to check out Sporza, not just for these articles, but just to follow along with the sport. They do a great job really highlighting Belgian sport. It's their version of ESPN, but there are a couple Sporza articles that came out. One with Michel Voets. He's a commentator for Sporza. And he was a bit more critical of the U.S. races. I believe that his main, the opening quote of the article was, "I've never seen it so empty at the U.S. World Cups." And if you see pictures from Waterloo, I could see it in Fayetteville because it's a weekday race and there's no amateur racing. But judging by how my eardrums were ringing going up Mount Crumpet. That's not an assessment I would have made. You know, and it's just, I think it also highlights how big the US is. I think it's very easy to be critical of these races in the US and say, well, you know, we're trying to globalize the sport and it's not where we want it to be after several years of making this effort. You know, we should pull back. You know, we've done our time. It's time for us to pull back. And I don't see that, because it's still very difficult for people to comprehend how big the US is. But after Michelle Vogt's article came out, there was another article in Sporza where they were talking to Thomas Vandenspiegel. He's the CEO of Flanders Classics, I believe, and he was defending these races more in the US. Flanders Classics puts on the World Cups here, so of course he has a vested interest in defending it. But he made the point that I believe it was 35 different states are represented in Waterloo, I believe is what he said. And he was highlighting the travel that involved and the logistics. And it's just, it's he's willing to make that effort and investment. I believe that. So I'm pulling up the article now. There's a quote saying that being away from home a lot, traveling far, that's simply part of the life of a top athlete. We have to see how we can facilitate that as an organization. That is part of the professionalization of the sport. So there is a vested interest to make this sport more global. If you follow Sven Nys, he's been a big advocate for this. Erwin Vervecken, when he was racing, he made efforts to come over to the U.S. as world champion in an effort to help globalize the sport. And we're trying to grow this sport more in the U.S. That's something that it is a Eurocentric sport. So when we have an opportunity like the GCN televising the new USCX series, there's a lot of optimism behind that, because we want to continue to promote our sponsors, our sport, and to get more people involved, because it's such a cool sport.
Yeah, I don't understand I don't understand some of the criticisms. You know, I guess one is, I think it's hard to tell the crowd sizes from TV coverage in general. I think you said Charm City the crowds were good and you thought they were really strong. And I don't think that in the TV you could see that. It's just the way some of it's shot and where some of the cameras are, and where people kind of group up. So he's kind of taking shots at the crowd coverage through the TV coverage is kind of difficult. But I think we've also seen a lot of growth, right? I mean, we got to watch a lot of racing. Like a guy like me, who's not going to be able to travel all over the country to see these races in person, but very much would like to watch them, was able to follow it and able to watch them. And because I'm watching those races, I'm going to watch more of the European races as well. Like I get invested in the riders who are here and who are racing. And even when, you know, we go back to two different schedules with the Americans and the Europeans, I'm going to follow both as long as I have the coverage to do it. And that's a credit to the coverage that we saw this last week and the growth in the US. So hopefully we continue to see that. He does say something about growth among youth in the sport, and there's some truth there.
Thomas or Michelle?
Michelle, I believe, in that article at the end of it, it talks about some investing more in the youth of the sport and the youth development. But I think we do that to some degree, but we're also, like you said, a very large country, and we have youth participating in lots of different sports that we have to compete with to get kids involved with it. So there's a lot of factors that come into play. You know, we don't have generations and generations of people bringing their kids into bike racing because that's what we did when we were kids. So that takes time.
Yeah, it does. And it you know, going back a few episodes when we brought Jeff Proctor on, this is something that reminds me, investing in the youth. Jeff Proctor is someone who's been around the sport for a number of years, 25 plus years, and has made an investment in developing the youth for cyclocross, bringing them over to Europe or having domestic opportunities for development here, whether it be in Montana or Vermont. That's what we need. It's just this country is so big. I try to train with someone like Stephen Hyde when I can, but he's still a 2-hour car drive away. Carrie lives, I mean, if we're going to speak, just driving time, probably a 14-hour car drive. Oh, no, he's in Roanoke. That's like 11 hours. That's a bit
Mhm.
closer than I thought. Gage is, I mean, that's got to be a 25-hour car drive to Colorado. Tobin's all the way on the West Coast. I'm not even going to think about driving all the way out there. But you have, Jeff highlighted what the development structure was like in the Netherlands, right? You have, I believe, 7 different provinces with, each province has their own technical training session. And if you're good enough in your provincial training session, you're invited to the more professional high level training session in Alphen, which is, it's Dutch only, but it's a high level training session. So if you're a promising young athlete that shows that, if you can go to a training session with 50 other young athletes and you and a couple of your peers are selected to go to a higher level training session, you're constantly around people that are better than you. And more importantly, people that are around your age. And I think that's something that a lot of young riders in the US deal with, is that it's very difficult to have a training session that has a couple dozen juniors
Mhm.
at. I know we have these hot pockets of cycling all over the country. Boulder has a really Boulder Junior Cycling has a very successful program that I like talking about it a lot, and I like seeing what they do for the development and youth of the sport. But it's very difficult to have that draw, and it's so much easier when you have the country the size of Belgium or the Netherlands. It's just it's you don't need to really go into it too much, but from what I see, or what I think domestic development opportunities through the spring and summer are critical for developing the youth in the US. It just, if we had regular training sessions in every pocket, whether it be in New England, like even in Massachusetts, there should be several well-known training sessions on a weekly basis for skills development. There should be communication between regional development opportunities with USA Cycling, and several development opportunities to get the top level riders from all over the country together several times throughout the spring and summer. So that requires a lot of communication and logistics, but that's the only way to be successful, is to place yourself around other successful people. Because otherwise you're just going to rise to the level of the people around you.
Right. But that all starts with exposure. And I think that's what we saw a lot of this last week, right? You're not going to get somebody who's going to start the sport if they don't know it exists or they don't see it. And, in addition to talking about developing high level athletes that you're alluding to or developing here, we're also talking about just people who just show up and want to watch the racing that may not be invested in that process or a product of that process. I thought our athletes competed really well, right? You guys had some, as Americans, and you guys had some great finishes. So we are competing there, but also just getting more people who go, hey, it looks like fun to go party at one of these races on the weekend, and it's pretty close, and I'm going to go do it. And I think we're seeing more people that are into that, and hopefully that will grow, and that the TV coverage helps increase those opportunities. And hopefully the Europeans see it that way and keep investing in us so that we can keep investing in the sport, because their presence makes a huge difference when it comes to that, for sure.
Absolutely.
So with that, I kind of had a couple other questions for you. We had one fan question, and I had one question for you just out of curiosity. We saw, since the last time we talked, both your sister Emma and Katie Keough announced that they were, I guess Katie's retiring. I don't know if Emma's calling it retiring or stepping away or whatever it is. And that's sort of their story to tell. But I'm curious for you, when you see people close to you like that, who you've raced with and trained with and grown up with and those kind of things, and they're moving away from the sport for whatever reasons they have, does that give you a pause or perspective on your career, sort of where you are and where you want to be in the next couple of years? Like, do you think about that? Does that affect you when you see two announcements like that to two people who I assume have been pretty close with you over the years?
Yeah, it absolutely does. Someone like Katie Keough, we've been on the same team for 9 years, I believe. And we've grown to know each other quite well. And she's an athlete I really do respect. She's been at a really high level. She's podiumed in the overall of the World Cup. She's won a World Cup. She's been close many times at the national championships, and she's had a lot of success. And I think most importantly, she's had an impression on a lot of people. And it's the same for Emma, my sister. She's had an impression on a lot of people, to help bring them closer to the sport of cycling or to inspire them in some way. And that's ultimately what, I mean, I want to inspire people. I want to leave an impression on someone. And whether it, helps attract them to the sport of cyclocross or helps them be a better person. I want to have an impact on the people around me. And it's much easier said than done, but that's through character and your actions. So I think both Emma and Katie have had a significant impact on the people around them in their communities. We're going to miss them at the races. But I think, both of them with the careers they've had, can really hold their head up high. I'm hoping I'm still going to be trying to drag Emma to the races, in some capacity, but both of them seriously can hold their head up high with the impact they've had on the people around them and in the sport.
Yeah, no doubt. Two great racers. So Cincy, anything we should know about Cincy? We have one fan question I want to get to, but before we hit that, we got Cincy coming up. What should we be looking for? What's the expectations there?
So Cincinnati, it is the final C1 weekend that we have in the final weekend of the USCX series. This will be televised. You can find it on GCN. I definitely encourage you to go watch it. It's going to be some really exciting racing, and we're going to be back to mainly North American fields. Most of our European competitors have gone. They're back home. They flew back out of Chicago Monday, I believe. So it's going to be the usual suspects of the North American field. Carey, Gage, Steven, Eric Bruner's going really well now, so I expect to see them at the front. This track is on an old golf course, so it's kind of these rolling mounds, and if it's rainy and slick, we'll pull up the weather for this weekend, but if it rains, it gets very slick because with it being on that old golf course, it's that, greasy top layer that only the top kind of lets go. And you have that really greasy mud that's kind of hard packed underneath. But it's going to be fast racing. It's going to be fun.
Definitely looking forward to that. And as much as it's fun to watch the Europeans race, it's also really fun to see that North American contingent sort of battle it out as well. So I'm looking forward to seeing some of that, because we don't always get to see those races like that televised. So that'll be fun to see.
So it's weather-wise, it's looking like Thursday, 50% chance of rain, just overcast Friday. Saturday, looking like sun, partly overcast. Sunday, 40% chance of rain. So
let's hope that goes up and up and up. I want to see some more muddy crosses.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So we got a fan question here. It's from Jim Wagner. Jim says, I appreciate your recent comments on tire choice. I try to help my junior racer son with tire choice and pressure, but I'm confused about when you would ever use file treads. I believe you rode intermediate tires at Go Cross on what appeared to be a dry and fairly hard packed track. If not file treads on that terrain, when would you ride them? Thanks for the insight, which is very helpful to novices trying to learn more about cross skills and strategies.
So a file tread is a tire that obviously lower profile than a Grifo. It has less rolling resistance, but it's a tire that, if you think about it, with it being so low profile, you have more rubber on the ground. So you have more surface area on the ground. So it works well at lower pressures on sand, a tire that's going to float over a bit more. So this is an extreme, but if you're riding a Limus tire on sand, too much of that digs into the sand instead of floats on top, because that tread, I mean, a Limas is more of a tractor tire. A Grifo works well in the sand, but that file tread helps you kind of float over the sand a little bit more. Some conditions where, if it's really icy, I've seen a guy like Sven in some, older race videos riding a file tread, even if it's icy, because he has more rubber on the surface. So there's more of that contact with the surface area.
That's interesting. I never thought about that with ice.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess with ice, it doesn't really matter, right? How much tread you have anyway, right? So the having the more rubber would be a bigger advantage than having tread.
Right. Well, the thing is also, when you have something like ice, it's very easy to lock up the brakes. So once you lock up the brakes, you're just going to slide. There's no amount of traction that's going to save you. So you always want to be pedaling and kind of keeping engaged with the traction. So it's sometimes a file tread works in that condition, but it's very, very, you have to make your own judgment on that. I chose to go with the Grifo for Go Cross and Roanoke because there's a bit more, not a lot of elevation, but there was enough, with some off cambers or some tighter turns that I felt like I need a little bit more traction. I saw a couple of riders around me that were using a lower profile file tread, or maybe even a chicane tire, which is file tread in the middle, and then you have Limas, lower profile Limas side knobs on the side. I like using a Grifo tire. It's a very good intermediate tire, well-rounded tire. And the thing is also too, with it being so dusty, that I felt like I need a little bit more bite with the tire. So that was, a Grifo has been my choice. I think for most of the races this year, I've been on Grifos, Baby Limas and Waterloo and Fayetteville, but I believe everything else has been a Grifo.
All right. Very cool. I hope that answers your question, Jim. Thanks for sending it in. And if you guys have more questions for Curtis, by all means, send them our way.
Yeah. I will say that in training, I always try to train on a file tread. Even if it's raining and muddy, a file tread helps kind of build the skill set. It helps you're trying really hard to maintain traction, or it's easier to slide out. So it's better for practicing and training skills on file treads. Just riding in a condition that you wouldn't normally ride it in. So if it's raining out, pro tip, take out the file treads, go have some fun sliding around, try to find traction in creative ways, because you're going to have an easier tire to find traction with come race day.
There you go. That's a good answer to the question then is when would you use a file tread? We'll use them mostly in training to prepare for the races.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right.
Good stuff, man. All right. Anything else we need to know before we head into the weekend and watch some more racing?
I don't think so. We covered a lot. Yeah, we when you miss a week of podcasting and 6 races go by.
Yeah, definitely. We could definitely go for another hour probably on it, but we'll leave it at this and get ready for some more racing this weekend.
Okay. Awesome. Tony, thanks very much. And everyone else, thanks for listening along. If you haven't done so already, I encourage you to like, share, comment, subscribe, wherever you listen to podcasts. That helps us get the word out. And hopefully we can, as we grow the show, get more sponsors involved or get more people listening to this. Because ultimately I love talking about cyclocross and sharing my passion for the sport. Tony, I enjoy your enthusiasm and talking about this as well. So it's, really appreciate everyone following along. And if you can tune into the races this weekend on GCN, definitely worth the subscription. That's all for this week. Tony, take care, and we'll talk to you next week.
All right, man. We'll see you in Cincy.